I'm Robin, and I guess you could say my life's been a series of tough breaks, starting when I was just 10. That year, I lost the most important person in my life, my dad. He was the kind of dad everyone wishes they had, always there, always caring. Then one day, he was just gone. Heart attack, out of the blue. My world, well, it just shattered. Mom was devastated too, or so it seemed. But before I knew it, she was seeing Richard, a guy from her work, and within months, they were married. I tried to understand, really I did. But Richard? He was a piece of work from the get-go. Look here, young lady, he'd say in that condescending tone, right from the start. You're under my roof now, and you'll follow my rules. I remember staring at him, thinking, this is a bad dream, right? But no, it was real, all too real. And Mom? She just nodded along, like I was some stray dog he agreed to take in. The house felt smaller with him around. His rules were everywhere, choking me. No loud music, no TV after 8, lights out by 9. And if I so much as whispered a complaint? One particularly rough evening, I was up in my room, listening to music just a bit louder than Richard's rules allowed. He burst in, red-faced and fuming. This disrespect in my own house? Turn it off, now, he barked, yanking the cord out of the wall. The room went silent, but my head was screaming. I was just listening to some music, that's all. I tried, my voice small against his booming anger. Just nothing. You live here, you follow my rules. You think you're special? You think your mom's going to save you? Richard's face was inches from mine, his words like slaps. I looked over his shoulder, hoping Mom would step in, say something, anything. But there she was, just watching. Her eyes met mine for a second, and I saw something like, sorry? I don't know. It was gone in a flash, and she looked away, back to whatever she was doing. That night, I cried into my pillow, not because of the busted radio, or because of Richard's yelling. I cried because it hit me hard, Mom wasn't going to stand up for me. Not now, not ever. As days turned to weeks, I tried to keep my head down. I went to school, came back, did my chores, stayed out of Richard's way. But the house didn't feel like home anymore. It was like walking on eggshells, every step carefully calculated to avoid another blow-up. Life with Richard felt like living under a storm cloud, dark, heavy, always waiting for the next outburst. Then, out of nowhere, Mom announced she was pregnant. You'd think that might lighten things up, right? But no, it just shifted the tension into a new gear. When Ava was born, she was this tiny, perfect little thing. I loved her instantly. Holding her for the first time, I thought maybe, just maybe, she could bring us all together. Like, how could anyone be mad or harsh when there's such a sweet baby around? But Richard, he didn't see it that way. To him, Ava was his real start, his actual family. I guess I was just the reminder of a life he barged into, not one he chose. One evening, about a week after Mom brought Ava home, I was warming up a bottle in the kitchen. Richard walked in, his face all twisted up like he'd just swallowed something sour. Robin, make sure you keep your stuff away from the baby's things. I don't want any of your mess near my daughter, he snapped. I wanted to yell, to tell him that I lived here too, that I was part of this family whether he liked it or not. But I swallowed those words. Arguing with Richard was like talking to a brick wall, except the wall yelled back. Things got worse from there. Ava was a fussy baby, always crying unless she was held. Mom was tired all the time, and somehow, that was my fault too. Can't you do something useful? Richard would bark whenever Ava's crying dragged on a bit too long. One day, I was trying to study while babysitting Ava, and she just wouldn't settle down. I was rocking her, cooing at her, but she kept wailing. Richard stormed into the room, his face red, eyes bulging. Can't you keep her quiet? What are you, useless? I'm trying, I shot back, my voice rising despite myself. Babies cry, Richard. That's what they do. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You think you're smart, talking back like that? You're just a burden, Robin. We'd be better off if you weren't here. Mom came in then, her eyes darting between Richard and me. Richard, she began, but he cut her off. No, she needs to hear this. She's old enough to know she's in the way. Mom looked at me, her eyes filled with something like regret. Robin, maybe you should go to your room. That was it. No defense, no leave her alone, Richard. Just a quiet surrender. I walked out, Ava's cries echoing behind me as I went. Each day blurred into the next. I took care of Ava, dodged Richard's harsh words, and watched my mom fade into a shadow of herself, always tired, always stepping lightly around Richard. My love for Ava was the only clear thing in a house full of tension and whispered arguments. She became my little escape, a reason to smile even when the walls felt like they were closing in. The day that changed everything started like any other, quiet and tense. I was trying to keep out of Richard's way, making myself as small as possible in the corners of the house. But even silence can be too loud for some people. I was in the kitchen, fixing myself a sandwich, when I heard their voices drifting from the living room. We need to talk about Robin, Richard said, his voice low and serious. She's not my responsibility. Not when I have my own daughter to think about. I froze, my hand gripping the knife so hard it hurt. I shouldn't have been listening, but I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. And what do you suggest? Mom's voice was tired, resigned. It's simple. She goes to live with her Aunt Lucy. Your sister-in-law. We can't be expected to feed and clothe her indefinitely. There was a pause, a heavy, heart-sinking silence. Then Mom said, "Okay, I'll call Lucy." That okay shattered something inside me. I left the sandwich untouched and slipped out the back door, tears burning my eyes. The cold air was a slap, but it was nothing compared to the betrayal. My own mother had agreed to send me away like I was nothing more than a problem to be solved. The move to Aunt Lucy's was abrupt. I had a weekend to pack up my life, which, it turned out, fit into 2 cardboard boxes and a suitcase. Mom drove me over, the car ride filled with the kind of silence that suffocates. Aunt Lucy opened the door before we even knocked. Her expression was stern, her eyes scanning me like I was another chore she had to deal with. "So, this is Robin," she said, not a question, but a flat statement. "I'll show you your room. You can manage your own bags." The house was as cold inside as it looked from outside, all shadows and sharp angles. My room was upstairs, small and furnished with just the essentials, a bed, a dresser, and a desk. It felt more like a cell. Mom lingered awkwardly in the doorway while I unpacked. Neither of us knew what to say. Finally, she cleared her throat. "I'll come visit," she added, but we both knew it was just something to say. Empty words to fill the empty space between us. Then she left, and I was alone with Aunt Lucy, who had no illusions about why I was there. "Dinner is at 6, she said, her voice all business. "You'll help with cooking and cleaning. Rules are simple. Do as you're told, and we'll get along fine." I didn't reply, just unpacked my things, each item a reminder of the life I was leaving behind. It didn't take long. I didn't have much. Life with Aunt Lucy was regimented and strict. There was little warmth and no comfort. Dinner that first night set the tone, meatloaf that was more like shoe leather, and vegetables boiled to a mush. Conversation was minimal, consisting mainly of Aunt Lucy detailing my chores and responsibilities. "Your job is to make sure this place stays clean," she instructed, her fork pointing accusingly at me across the table. "And don't think you can slack off because you're family. If anything, I expect more from you." "Yes, Aunt Lucy," I replied, pushing the tasteless food around my plate. School offered little respite. It was a place to go during the day, but the whispers followed me. "That's the girl who lives with her aunt because her mom didn't want her." Every whispered word was a knife, cutting deep. On a gray Saturday, Aunt Lucy was out, probably stalking through the grocery store like she stalked around the house. I was alone, which was rare and felt like a small, stolen treasure. I was supposed to be dusting or something, but instead, I hovered in the living room, drawn to the forbidden fruit resting on the couch arm, Aunt Lucy's cell phone. I knew I shouldn't even think about it, but next thing I knew, my fingers were wrapped around it, and I was scrolling for one name, Mom. My heart thudded like it was trying to punch its way out of my chest as I pressed the call button. "Hello?" Her voice, familiar yet so distant, cracked through the speaker. "Mom, it's me, Robin." My voice shook, betraying my nerves. There was a pause, a stretching silence that felt like a chasm opening up between us. "Robin, why are you calling?" I just wanted to hear your voice." The words stumbled out, clumsy and childlike. "Robin, I can't talk to you right now. You shouldn't call here." Her voice was hurried, laced with a tension I knew all too well. "But why not? I miss you. When can I come home?" The desperation must have been clear in my voice. "This isn't a good time. Richard doesn't. It's just not a good time. Don't call here again, okay?" The finality in her tone was a slap. "Mom, please," but she hung up, cutting off any plea I had left. I stood there, the dead phone in my hand, feeling the silence of the house swell around me. I put the phone back, exactly how I'd found it, hoping against hope that Aunt Lucy wouldn't notice. But she did. She always noticed. When Aunt Lucy got back, her sharp eyes picked up on something off about me right away. "You've been crying," she accused as she stepped through the door, dropping her grocery bags on the kitchen table with a thud that felt like it matched my heartbeat. "It's just allergies," I lied, wiping my face with my sleeve. "Don't lie to me, girl," she snapped, her voice hard as nails. "What did you do?" I shook my head, backing away, but the truth spilled out. I called my mom." Her face turned thunderous. "You used my phone? Without permission?" I nodded, miserable and scared, bracing for her anger to break over me like a wave. "Let me tell you something about your mother," she hissed, stepping closer, so close I could feel her breath. "She doesn't need you. That's the hard truth. Get used to it." That night, after a long day of extra chores and no dinner as part of my punishment, I lay in bed, the weight of Aunt Lucy's words crushing me. Maybe she was right. Maybe Mom really didn't need me. Maybe nobody did. After what felt like a lifetime under Aunt Lucy's strict regime, I started to believe I would never feel part of a family again. Then, one dreary afternoon, Aunt Lucy called me into the living room with a more serious expression than usual. "Pack your things," she said, not even bothering with a hello. "Your mother stopped sending money to take care of you. I can't afford to keep you here without that. You're going to your grandmother's. Pack up. I'm driving you there today." The drive to Grandma's was long and silent. I didn't know what to expect. I hadn't seen her in years, not since Mom married Richard. Would she even want me? Or would I just be another mouth to feed? When we pulled up to the house, it was nothing like Aunt Lucy's place. It was warm, inviting, with flowers in the yard and curtains fluttering in the breeze. My heart lifted a little as we walked up to the front door. Grandma opened the door before we could even knock. Aunt Lucy cleared her throat, stepping forward. "Well, here she is. I did what I could, but without the money." Her voice trailed off, leaving the unsaid words hanging in the air. Grandma's eyes hardened as she looked at Aunt Lucy. "Thank you for bringing her. I can take it from here." Aunt Lucy nodded, handed Grandma my bag, and without another word, turned and left. Just like that, I was in a new place, with a new guardian. The first few days were awkward. Grandma was reserved, and I was used to keeping my head down and my mouth shut. But slowly, things started to change. She asked me about school, about what I liked to do, about how I felt. No one had cared about what I felt in a long time. One evening, we were sitting at the kitchen table, having tea, when she finally spoke about everything. I should have stepped in earlier. "But we're going to fix things, you and I. You're safe here, Robin. This is your home now. Safe, home. Those words felt foreign, but as I looked into Grandma's eyes, I started to believe them. Maybe this could be different. Maybe I wasn't just a burden to be passed around. Thank you, Grandma, I managed to say, my voice thick with emotions I hadn't let myself feel in a long time. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. No more thank yous needed. We're family, and this is what families do. They take care of each other. From that day on, Grandma kept her word. She was strict, but unlike Aunt Lucy, her strictness was tempered with love and understanding. She encouraged me to do well in school, to find hobbies I liked, to make friends. She was there when I came home, always ready to listen, to help. When I turned 16, Grandma sat me down in our cozy living room, the smell of her famous apple pie wafting through the air. Robin, I've been thinking, she started, her voice serious but soft. I want to make it official. I want to adopt you. I jumped up and hugged her, feeling a security I hadn't felt in years. That hole that Mom left, it wasn't fully gone, but it was getting smaller, day by day, replaced by something far better. You won't regret this, Grandma, I said, squeezing her tighter. I know I won't, she chuckled, hugging me back. Now, let's talk about your future. You're smart, Robin. You've got a sharp mind, and you should use it to help people. Like a doctor? I ventured, thinking about all the times I had helped bandage up the knees of the neighborhood kids. Exactly like a doctor. It's a noble profession, and you'd be great at it. How about we get you some tutors, make sure you can ace those exams? True to her word, Grandma arranged for tutors. Math, science, English, she covered all the bases. I worked hard, driven not just by my desire to make something of myself, but to make her proud, to show her she hadn't made a mistake in choosing me. The day I got the letter saying I had been accepted into medical college on a full grant, Grandma and I cried and laughed in equal measure. You did it, Robin, she exclaimed, holding the letter like it was a precious gem. We did it, Grandma. I corrected her, knowing I could never have reached this point without her. College was a whirlwind of studies, exams, and more studies. It was hard, harder than anything I'd ever done, but it was also thrilling. I lived in the dorms, but no matter how busy, I always found time to come home to Grandma every weekend. She was my rock, always ready with a hot meal and a listening ear. Tell me everything, she'd say, and I did. Every success, every setback, she shared them all. When graduation day came, Grandma was there in the front row, clapping the loudest, her eyes shining with tears. That's my girl, she whispered as I walked across the stage to collect my diploma. The weight of the ceremonial had nothing compared to the weight of her pride. I completed my internship, landed a job as an oncologist, and began the real work of saving lives. It was grueling but fulfilling, and every day I felt grateful to Grandma for believing in me, for steering me onto this path. But life, as I had learned early on, wasn't keen on handing out happy endings without throwing in some twists. When I turned 32, Grandma got sick. The diagnosis was swift and cruel, cancer, an ironic twist of fate considering my profession. I took care of her, using all I had learned, all I knew, but some battles were not to be won. When she passed, it was peaceful, at home, with me holding her hand. Planning her funeral was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Mom didn't come. Aunt Lucy didn't come. None of my blood relatives did. But the church was full. Neighbors, friends, people whose lives she had touched, they all came to say goodbye to the woman who had been a pillar of kindness and strength in the community. Life without Grandma was lonely, but I had grown accustomed to her house, her things, and the memories that lingered in the corners of every room. It was in the midst of this new solitude that they came, Mom, Richard, and Ava, my half-sister. They didn't knock. The door swung open like a gust of wind had pushed it, and there they were, standing in the doorway as if they belonged there. Mom stepped forward, her eyes scanning the room, resting on things that had never been hers. Robin, we need to talk, she began, her tone forceful. Your grandmother left everything to you, and we think it's only fair that you share it. After all, she was my mother. I almost laughed, but the situation was too sad for that. Fair? When has any of this been fair? I shot back. Richard, who hadn't changed much except for more lines on his face and less hair on his head, chimed in, his voice gruff. Listen, Robin, you're doing well for yourself, a big shot doctor now. Don't be ungrateful. We're family. The word family coming from him was like acid on my tongue. Family? You threw me out when I was a child. And now you come here, calling me family? Mom's expression twisted, a mix of anger and something like desperation. Don't raise your voice at us, young lady. You're rich now, and it's only right you support us. I couldn't hold back the laughter this time, it bubbled up, bitter and harsh. Rich? I work for every penny I earn. And support you? After everything? That's enough. Richard stepped forward, his finger pointing straight at me. You'll regret this attitude. We can take this to court. We'll get our share one way or another. That's when I dropped the bombshell, the one piece of information that Grandma made sure was ironclad. Actually, you can't. Grandma adopted me. Legally, I'm not even your daughter anymore. You have no claim here. The shock on Mom's face would have been satisfying if it weren't so tragic. What? Adopted? When? Years ago, I said flatly. You wouldn't know. You never visited. You never called. Richard's face turned an ugly shade of red, but before he could start again, I walked to the door, opened it wide, and pointed outside. I think you should leave now. They stood there, a pathetic trio, caught in the web of their greed. Mom looked from me to the open door and back, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. As the door clicked shut behind them, the silence settled around me, heavy, but somehow sweet. I let out a long, slow breath, one I didn't realize I'd been holding. It was a regular day at the clinic, the usual bustle of patients and paperwork, when my phone buzzed in the pocket of my white coat. Glancing at the screen, I saw it was Mrs. Henderson, my neighbor and a close friend of Grandma's. Her voice was tight, urgent when I answered. Robin, you need to come home now. Your mother and that man, they've broken into your house. They're moving things in, acting like they own the place. I didn't hesitate. Apologizing to my boss, I grabbed my keys and raced out, driving faster than I should have. The whole way, my mind raced. Pulling up to the house, I saw it immediately, the front door was open, and sure enough, there was a new sofa, half in, half out, as Richard and a mover wrestled with it. Mom was there too, directing operations like she was the queen of the castle. I stormed up, my blood boiling. What the hell do you think you're doing? This is not your home. Mom turned, her expression cold and dismissive. This is just as much my home as yours. It was my mother's house. You have no legal right here, and you know it, I said firmly, my hands clenched at my sides. I want you out. They exchanged a look, an arrogant amusement in their eyes that made my skin crawl. Make us, Richard taunted, turning back to the sofa. That was it. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. I explained the situation to the dispatcher with as much calm as I could muster. Yes, they are trespassing and refusing to leave. Yes, I'll wait here. The police arrived 10 minutes later, 2 officers approaching as I stood resolute on the front lawn. I explained everything again, the adoption, the inheritance, the blatant disrespect and violation of my property. Mom started wailing as the officers questioned her, playing the victim as always. We're just family trying to settle our dear mother's estate. She's confused, officer, she's been very stressed. Ma'am, do you have legal right to this property? One of the officers asked her, unswayed by her theatrics. She faltered, glancing at Richard who could only shrug, caught in the act. The officers turned to me. Do you want to press charges? I looked at them, then at Mom and Richard, their faces now masks of worry. Yes, I do. The police made it clear to them, leave now, or be arrested for breaking and entering and trespassing. Mom cried, Richard cursed, but they gathered their things, and under the watchful eyes of the police, they left. Turning back to the house, I felt its familiarity wrap around me like a blanket. This was my sanctuary, Grandma's legacy. The fight was over. I was home, truly home, and nothing would drive me away again.